Hi everyone, welcome back. Today's video is all about significant figures and adding and subtracting. Obviously, we're going to go over the rule that we use when adding and subtracting, and we're going to do several examples, and those examples do of course include scientific notation in them. All right, let's get started. When we are adding and subtracting and using our significant figures, the first thing that we need to do is we need to define our rule that we're going to use. So our rule states that whatever number has the fewest number of decimal places, that is what is going to limit our number of decimal places in our answer. Okay, let's keep that rule in mind. Let's go to our first problem here. Really simple addition problem. I'm going to plug this into my calculator, and this is what my calculator gives me. And of course, as we all know, the calculator is probably not going to give you the correct number of sig figs. So let's think about our rule and decide how many sig figs we need in our answer. So I only have two numbers that I'm adding here, and I have 3 decimal places in my first number, and I have 2 decimal places in my second number. So obviously my 3.20 with 2 decimal places is going to limit my answer. So therefore my answer must have only 2 decimal places. Now my calculator gave me 3. You might have a calculator that gives you more than 3, but my calculator gave me 3. So I know that I need to round to the second decimal place. That is going to round up, and my answer is 15.88 with the correct number of sig figs. Sound good? Let's go on to my second example. All right, this example I'm adding 3 numbers, and one of them actually turns out to be a negative number, or you could think of it as I'm adding one number and subtracting the other, however it makes sense to you. Again, when I put this in my calculator, this is the number I get out from my calculator. So my question is, okay, what place do I round to? All right, let's take a look at all the numbers that went into getting this answer. And my first one here, I have 4 decimal places. And my second number here, I have 2 decimal places. And if I look at my 3 there, I have 0 or no decimal places. So if I go to my answer, again, my calculator has given me 4 decimal places, but in this case, what's going to limit me is my 3 here because it has no decimal places. That means I need to round to 0 decimal places. So my negative 1.9044 simply rounds to -2. Now I know that feels strange because you have 2 numbers that have multiple decimal places, and it just kind of feels like you should have a decimal place in the answer. However, we need to make sure that we're always using our rule, and if we're obeying our rule, it means that our answer actually has 0 decimal places because that 3 is what limits us. Let's go on to my third example. This is more like what you're going to see when, say, you calculate a molar mass. If I take a look at my 3 numbers here that I'm using, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 decimal places up here. I have 4 decimal places here, and I have 4 decimal places here. Okay, so obviously 4 decimal places is going to be my limit. When I put this in my calculator, this is the answer I get. And lo and behold, at least in my calculator actually gave me the correct number of sig figs. Huzzah! Again, don't trust those calculators, but sometimes they do give you the correct number of sig figs. That one was an easy one. Let's go on and take a look at our scientific notation. This is going to be a little bit trickier. You guys know I love scientific notation, so we need to be able to work with it when we're adding and subtracting. Okay, so here are the 3 numbers that I want to use. They're all in scientific notation, but my problem is I actually cannot compare decimal places here because I have a 10 to the 5th, a 10 to the 8th, and a 10 to the 3rd. So my first step is actually going to be to convert these guys all to the same exponent. Now I just happened to choose 10 to the 5th because the first number wasn't 10 to the 5th, but you could convert all of them to 10 to the 8th, 10 to the 3rd, or really whatever you want to do. Just make sure that they're all to the same exponent. So if you take a look at my second number here, just notice I went from a 10 to the 8th to a 10 to the 5th. So my decimal moves 3 places. Here I'm going from a 10 to the 3rd to a 10 to the 5th. So my decimal place is going to move 2 places. And now I've got all of my numbers in 10 to the 5th. Now I'm going to take just the first part of all of my scientific notation, and I'm going to add them up in my calculator. And for right now, I'm just going to ignore the second part of my scientific notation. And my calculator gives me this number right here. Now, this is the step where we're going to decide on our decimal places. So don't convert it into proper scientific notation quite yet. Let's talk about our decimal places. Okay, I've got a lot of blue on the screen here. Let's go to some green. All right, so just like I did with my easy problems, I'm going to count up decimal places. So here I have 2 decimal places, and this number I also have 2 decimal places. And in this last number I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 decimal places. Okay, so what's going to limit me? I'm going to be limited to 2 decimal places. However, notice my calculator actually only gave me 1 decimal place. So the question is, what do I do in this case? I'm used to taking off decimal places because I have too many, but what do I do if I don't have enough? Well, if you don't have enough, it's actually a really easy fix. You just add a 0 in, and that gives you 2 decimal places. So notice that these 2 numbers here, while they are mathematically the same, they are different in terms of their numbers of sig figs, and that is an important distinction for us. So I've got my correct number of sig figs here. However, obviously I am not in the correct format for scientific notation, so my very last step is to take this 10 to the 5th to the correct number for my exponent, and I'm going to move 1, 2, 3 places. So my 10 to the 5th becomes a 10 to the 8th. And this is my correct answer with the correct number of sig figs. Okay, I know that's a lot because that's a lot of steps. Let's do this for one more example. This time, of course, we're going to go to negative exponents. Let's go back to blue. My last example here, I am adding a bunch of really small numbers, so I've got negative exponents. Again, notice I have different exponents here. So my first step is going to be to convert these numbers all to the same exponents. Again, for my case, I just chose 10 to the negative 7th because it happened to be the first one. So for my second number, you see I went from a 10 to the negative 6 to a 10 to the negative 2nd. So my decimal place had to move 1 space to the right. My third number, I'm going 10 to the negative 9th to 10 to the negative 2nd. So I'm going 2 places to the left. Again, it's the only thing that's important is that for your first step, all of your exponents for scientific notation are the same. All right, so I've got them all in the same exponent for scientific notation. Now is when I simply take the first part, plug that into my calculator, and add them up. And this is what my calculator gives me. Again, I'm just going to pull down this 10 to the negative 7th. And I'm going to switch up to my green again to count up decimal places. Okay, so my first number, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 decimal places. My second number, I have 3 decimal places. And my last number, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 decimal places. So in this case, my 3 decimal places is going to limit me. So you can see when I move to this step here, I'm going to round it here to this 3rd decimal place. Again, I had to take off decimals instead of adding decimals in. So this answer has my correct number of sig figs, but again, it's not in the correct format for scientific notation. My decimal point needs to move just one space this time. So my -7 turns to a -6, and here is my answer, correctly in scientific notation and also with my correct number of sig figs. Well, hopefully now you're much more comfortable adding and subtracting and using your rule for sig figs. I know that when it's in scientific notation, having that extra step does mean extra time and it does mean extra work, but if we want to get our sig figs correct, we just can't get around it, unfortunately. But like with anything, when you practice it, it'll get easier and it'll get faster. I am also going to be doing videos for multiplication and division and also for mixed operation, so please check those out, especially if you have questions about that. And thanks so much for watching.